So you've done so much from on your website at Karma Chow, from your own personal journey to being featured on NBC and Live Strong to having plant-based recipes, books, blog articles, and small world. You're in Santa Barbara. You've
Yes.
been to the yoga studio that my brother was at. Small world.
Small world. Yeah. I know. I love that we have that connection.
Yeah. Anyways, so glad you're on today. I'm going to jump right into things by asking you about the story that you prominently feature, and some of your background. You mentioned
Okay.
that the Sports Illustrated model image was commonplace in your family, that magazine, and
Yes.
that you think that this desire to look like a Sports Illustrated model drove you to develop an emotional eating habit. Can you tell me more about that?
So, growing up in a household with two older brothers and obviously a father, and all of my brother's friends being around all of the time, it was, it was the awaited annual event of the year because I grew up in a time of no computers and no phones and no internet, and so it was magazines. That's where we got all of our entertainment from, and so the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition was the awaited, thing of the year, and literally like who's going to be on the cover. My brothers were so excited. I even was excited to a certain point because I loved looking at these magazines and just like imagining that these women's lives, these models lives were like perfect and amazing because they looked a certain way, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of, so I would see my brothers and my father and their friends talking about these women and giving it a lot of attention. And I unconsciously took that in and made a decision that I need to look like that because that will help give me value and my life would be perfect. I had this very skewed idea, and that's kind of where my body dysmorphia started. And then from that, struggles with food. So I turned into just a crazy yo-yo dieter, an over exerciser, eater, all of that.
Yeah, you mentioned
Mm.
some activities that you say crazy yo-yo dieter. You were doing fat burners and snack wells, which I actually
Oh,
haven't heard of. But what is a snack well? And you were doing no salad dressing and restricting and over exercising. What's a snack well?
so in the 90s, the food industry came out with a low fat, basically like snack cookie because it was always like Entenmann's and all the stuff that was really fattening. But these were like no fat, low calorie, and they were basically all chemicals. But I thought, oh my god, like fat free dessert, And so I would just load up on these fat free desserts, but they were totally loaded with sugar. Back then,
Oh,
I just didn't know better. They were just loaded with sugar. And I thought, I didn't realize the detriment that sugar had on my system or to like my body in general. You know what I mean? So if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, you know what snack wells are. You probably weren't even alive then.
I was, but not old enough to
Very,
remember.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
So
it does. I feel this stuff when I hear food companies saying fat free but tons of sugar.
right,
It is deliberate
yeah,
misadvertising or false advertising. There's something fundamentally wrong that you can say that and
yeah.
not have to put high sugar or whatever.
Right, right. Well, that movie, I don't know if you've seen the movie Fed Up, but the movie Fed Up talks a lot about just food packaging and labeling and how the industry really tricks us. And people who are not super educated around nutrition, they think, oh, low fat, fat free, light, that's good for me, right? So there is a lot of confusion around that, and they're tricking a lot of people, unfortunately.
They are, yeah. Just to continue this little tangent real quick, I there's this book, Food Politics, which describes this really in depth how we have a surplus of food, and that to get rid of all this food for these for-profit companies, they have to figure out a way to kind of believe and to trick us into eating all this extra food.
That's insane.
Crazy,
Not even
crazy.
real food. That's the problem,
Yeah,
right? Most of it is created in a factory. It's like not even real.
I know it's nuts. So how long were you doing some crazy yo-yo dieting stuff? When did you start? When did that kind of uh
So the body dysmorphia started around the age of about 13. And I was always an athlete growing up, and I definitely was not overweight, but I saw myself that way. And so being an athlete, I joined the gym at age 14. I was teaching aerobics by age 16. I was working out, 7 days a week, sometimes 2 hours a day, at least 1 to 2 hours a day. I was teaching. So I just became really obsessive, and that went on for over 30 years, to be honest. Like, it's only in the last 10 years that I've really come to the other side, and now do the work that I do with my clients. But that just looked like, years of body hatred, yo-yoing in my weight, just kind of always restricting my food. And then when I moved to California in the 90s, I got really privy to, the raw food diet and veganism, and I started to learn about nutrition. I thought I knew some, but I started to really learn a lot more. And I put myself through nutrition school. I got a certification, and that kind of changed my world. But then I started to do that kind of like still restricting, but eating only healthy foods, but overeating healthy foods. So when I would binge or when I would emotional eat, I would eat healthy food, but I'd overeat it to the point of like being sick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick, too, touching back to body dysmorphia. Perhaps this is an easy question, but even if you're slender or thin when you were yo-yoing, you'd go down. Did the body dysmorphia, maybe it was always there, and even no matter what weight you were at, did you think it went down when you were slender, or was it the same?
I never was happy.
Yeah.
I was never happy. Always, no matter what I weighed, no matter how I looked, I was never happy because it was just a deeper core belief about myself, right? It really had nothing to do, no matter what my body looked like, I couldn't be happy with it. You know what I mean? I mean, there might have been short periods that I would, but it would always come back because I didn't heal the original core belief. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And before we go into some of the nutrition stuff you were learning and that journey, what do you think that core belief was? Was it, I don't know if you had to put words to it, like it seems kind of just my putting on my childhood psychology hat right now in a quick 10-minute conversation, but like a validation, or, you mentioned males in your family, like maybe giving you attention based on how you looked. So maybe not like unconditional love, but something like that. How would you describe that belief of yours?
Well, yeah, I mean, it really was the number one, believing that the way I looked was my value. And so I didn't, it was really lack of self-worth, right? It was lack of believing I was lovable. I thought if I look a certain way, I'll be lovable, I'll get attention, people will think I'm the greatest. Like, it was just about feeling lovable. And I linked those two up, thinking if my body looks a certain way, then I'll be lovable, because I saw all the attention that the beautiful, skinny, modelly people get, right? And so, but ultimately, it was a lack of my own self worth and feeling lovable,
Yeah,
basically.
it's funny how, maybe it's not funny, but that even when you are more thin or whatever, the belief never changes.
Yeah.
If I'm unworthy based on a look, then when you look a certain way, you're still feeling that way. It never changes. Okay,
Yeah,
so
and our society puts so much stress on that, right? Like, if we look a certain way, we are whatever, successful, valuable. Our society, our culture really puts a lot of stress on that, and that creates so much of that dysmorphia for people,
yeah,
especially.
and part of me wonders too, coming back to those food politics, is I wonder how much of this is innate in our collective beings, and then I wonder how much of this is kind of artificially created through advertising and
Yeah,
brilliant marketing to make us desire things. And
right. We don't know percentages. Definitely are. I mean, I'm sure they both. I think
yeah,
as human beings, a lot of us have that kind of inherent feeling of maybe not being valuable or worthy in the world, and I think a lot of us struggle with that. It's a little bit of it is just, I think, just comes with our nature, right? And but then you have societal norms, cultural norms, all the stuff that's out there in the world. And I lived in LA for 13 years, and it's like everywhere everyone's got plastic surgery, nobody looks real, everybody's beautiful. It's like I felt like I was the ugliest person in the world when I lived in LA, you know? And I was just like, I felt so small when I lived there. It's crazy.
Will dieting always be there? Imagine like 15 years from now, 40 years from now, even that the science of haze, health at every size, intuitive eating, it's out there. It's had
Right.
time to permeate, but dieting is just so simple to understand. There's a temporary, illusion of success, blah, blah, blah. It's so easy to trick people into thinking that if you look a certain way, you will get all this happiness. Will dieting always be there?
I think so. I think on some level it will. I know that there's so many of us working against it or really wanting to shift the way we think about it. And I do feel like it's had a little time to permeate, but it's so just in its infancy stage, you know. And but I feel like people are becoming more and more aware, and there's definitely a shift happening. But I think also innately as human beings, we want the quick fix. That's what we go for, right? And a lot of us aren't into personal growth, and we aren't into like knowing that we need to do some deeper work to really heal what we're struggling with. We're just always going to look for that next thing, the next shiny object, the next fix, that right. And I think that's just part of being a human. And so I think in some ways it will always be there. I think it's changed a lot in the last 5 years even. And but also the food industry is a big issue in terms of dieting and all of that and what they tell us and what they put out there. So I think we have to eat, we have to survive. And so I think it's on some level, it's always going to be there.
Yeah, it reminds me of smoking, how we did have a shift back then, but we still have cigarettes now. Everyone knows cigarettes are bad for you, but
Yeah.
yeah,
And we don't need cigarettes to survive. We need food to survive. So we can't ever
true,
completely get rid of it, right?
true.
Like cigarettes,
Yeah,
literally, they could go away tomorrow. And although people would, probably be upset about it, we don't need it to survive. So
yeah.
yeah.
So let's come back to you're in nutrition school, learning about nutrition, um, and you are binge eating, emotional eating on nutritious foods. How do you get out of that paradigm?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was really how I got into when I did my master's in spiritual psychology. I went through a program at University of Santa Monica, and that was what really helped me shift out of that. And so I knew that it wasn't the dieting that was going to get me there. It wasn't changing my food. It wasn't any of that, because I was already a healthy eater, a nutritionist, all of that stuff. But I kind of had this dirty little secret. I was emotional eating, and nobody really knew what was going on. And I was 30 pounds heavier than I am now. And I was miserable in my body. And I just thought, like, something has to change, because I don't want this monkey on my back anymore, of like this thing with food. I felt like it followed me around everywhere I went, and I couldn't enjoy my life. Like, I look back now at pictures and I have such a fake smile. Like, it looks like I'm having fun, but I can see there was so much pain, like I was in so much pain. So I really had to do more of the deep inner work. I had to change my belief system. I had to change my mindset. I had to do some healing on a deeper level. And that's what got me to the other side. And it's been a journey, and it will be a journey for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I remember on your website, you were at P90X. You were training with the creator or the team of P90X, and you kind of had like an awakening moment. Do you remember that? Can you share with the people listening?
I don't know if there was an awakening moment when I was doing P90X, but Tony Horton, who created P90X, is a very, very good friend of mine. I cooked for him for many years and traveled with him and spoke. And um, there was a moment where um, I mean, this is a little bit harsh on his end, and I don't think he would today say these words, but I was at that time, I was emotional eating and no one knew, and I was a lot heavier than I am now. And he basically said to me, like, listen, if you're going to be traveling with me and talking about nutrition, you kind of need to look the part. And he knew that I was unhappy in my body, and he knew I was really struggling, but he didn't know why. You know what I mean? And so that kind of hit me really hard. It hit me over the head. And then I started working out really. I had always been an exerciser, but I took some time off, and I was just doing yoga, but I was emotional eating so much. So it wasn't like helping in terms of my body and the way and like keeping it at its natural weight, which is where I am now, where I've been the last 10 years. So that was kind of a little bit of a wake up call. But my biggest aha really was when my friend, who I woke up one morning after a binge, I called her in tears, and she gave me a lot of tough love and basically said, like, listen, number one, you're being so self-centered right now. You're totally full of yourself, because I was like, oh, I'm so fat and I'm this and I'm that and blah, 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 blah. And she was like, so many people have it way worse than you. And like, you're not fat, you're not obese, you're not sick, you have a good life. And then she said, I want you to get up off the couch. I want you to go be of service today, right now. Go outside, go do something, be of service. And then she said, and the next thing I want you to do is get help. Go get a coach, go get a therapist, someone to help you. And that was the biggest wake up call.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's such a good friend.
It was hard to hear, but yes, I so thank her to this day. And it just was what I needed, because I'm like, I can do this on my own. I know nutrition. I know healthy food. I know, right? But like, I couldn't do it on my own, because there was something bigger than me that was there that I didn't know how to access, and I didn't know how to heal it.
Yeah, the heart. Do you by chance remember if you did go volunteer that day, and if so, what you did?
So I basically, I live downtown in Santa Barbara, and I just basically went out on the street and I just started talking to homeless people. And there was one girl who I actually became friendly with, and I would sit with her regularly. She had 2 dogs, and I always would like sit with her and just listen to her story. And so that's what I did. I'm like, I'm going to go find Jamie. And I would do that regularly anyway, but like, just for her to say that to get me out of, and then I started volunteering more regularly doing stuff. So
Wow.
being of service, I mean, I'm in service in my business, but being in service in that way is so different, because it's selfless.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So, can someone do this on their own? Meaning, do you need to get a professional? Do or are there certain circumstances where you can educate yourself through podcasts and blogs and
I mean, you can educate yourself, but who's going to hold you accountable? Who's going to point out your blind spots? Who's going to guide you when you get stuck, right? Because that's the thing. People can do great for a while, and then they fall off track, they get stuck, they sabotage, and then it all kind of goes downhill, and then it's really hard for them to come back around.
yeah.
And so, listen, I tried for 20 plus years to do it on my own, and it never worked, ever. And so I'm a huge believer in coaching. I have a business coach. I have a personal coach. I have, like, I'm a big believer in investing, because I feel like if we're not growing, right, like, and we're not learning about ourselves and shifting this stuff, we're going to be stuck in it. And then life's going to pass by. And, I lost 30 years to this, and there's part of me that's like, dang, I wish I could have that back, so I could really enjoy the time instead of feeling so caught up about food all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest thing for people, is getting some headspace back so they can appreciate life and be there for
Yeah.
people.
I'm telling you, like 99% of my thoughts were about food, what I can eat, what I can't eat, if I'm getting fat, if I'm losing weight, what do I weigh? Like, it was insanity, right?
Yeah.
I call it food prison, because that's what it felt like.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so you started getting help from a therapist or coach to talk about coach.
Yeah.
What was the style of coaching like? And I wanted to know too, you started going to the master's program for spiritual psychology.
Yeah.
Was this inspired by the coaching? So maybe first you could tell me a little bit about the coaching and then explore the master's spirituality program. What was coaching?
Yeah. Coaching came through the master's program. So because of the style, because of what we learned there, and the way we're trained, and the different modalities of psychology we learn, and how it's soul based versus ego based. It's all about soul line versus goal line. So we were really focusing on the internal world versus the external world. And I saw so much shift happening for myself, and I worked on healing a lot of relationships when I went through that program, but I hadn't fully healed the relationship with myself. So that was the start of it. And then I found my coach through that program, and we started to dive deeper into the food stuff and what I was experiencing and all that. And so the coaching really is, number one, it's solution oriented. It's really about supporting the person and their internal world. It's not about anything external. So there's no diets, there's no meal plans, there's no all that stuff that we tend to go to look for answers. I had to find the answers within through guidance and reflection and all of that stuff. And so it was really about accountability. It was really about having the support system and just knowing that I had someone there who had like gone through similar things I had gone through to lean on. Yeah.
Okay, got you. Yeah, I was wondering if the coaching program was spirituality looking inward based, or if there was some, it sounds like there was some food aspect of the coaching program that you participated in through the master's program. There was some food and spirituality. No, it's just spirituality.
Food didn't have anything to do with
That is awesome. That's awesome. So you're
nothing.
telling me that doing some spiritual work, contemplation, looking within, feeling within, this helped you overcome the food struggles, but the inner looking wasn't for food. It was just for the sake of inner looking. And by doing that, you,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
that's
Had nothing.
amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I did have practices around food, but it didn't come through that program. The practices I had around food came through my coach, but it wasn't meal plans. It wasn't following certain things. It basically was like letting go of all of my food rules, like really letting go of everything. And because it's not about the food ultimately. And that's really what I learned. And that was a huge eye-opening kind of experience for me to really understand like this is not about the food. It has nothing to do with it. And so I had to really start to let go of all of my ideas around food, the diet mindset, the diet culture, the way I saw food, right? Good, bad, healthy, unhealthy, can't have that, can have this, right? I had to let all that go. And it was scary. It really scared me, but it changed my world. And now I relate to food in such a different way. I can take it or leave it. I eat when I'm hungry. I nourish and fuel my body. It doesn't mean I don't ever indulge because I do, but the difference is I can do it without guilt. I can do it without overeating. I can do it without feeling out of control, all that stuff. It's like I have it and move on. There's no second thought.
Now, these principles that you mentioned, nourish your body, food as fuel, that letting go of food restrictions, um, I know you ultimately lost 30 pounds and have kept that off. Before you lost that weight and you're making this transition to a more soul-based approach, had you heard of intuitive eating, health at every size, or did you kind of discover these principles on your own?
I didn't even, I mean, I didn't even hear it until like years ago, to be honest, 3 years ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Or health at any size. Like I was already actually doing my coaching and working with people with mindful eating and all of that. But the intuitive eating, I mean, I had heard about it, but it wasn't really in my wheelhouse. And because to be honest, like so much of it starts internally, right? It was more about the internal process. And then, yes, let's look at our behaviors with food. Let's look at how we're eating, what we're eating, like why we're eating, all that stuff. That was important. But it's more about like what's pulling us there, what's the driver, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like you kind of got to the whole inward first, and that's how I understand intuitive eating and health at every size. But inward first, you were
Yeah.
kind of there a little bit beforehand, maybe.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And I
That's
realized
awesome.
too, like with my coaching, because I was a nutritionist and because I had been doing cleanses and all of that stuff that I would never really encourage now unless someone has zero issues with food, right? It's more about give your body a rest and all that stuff. But ultimately, I was only in that world of like nutrition and meal plans and all that stuff. And as I started to do this work, that all started to shift. And I told my clients, like, you're not going to get a meal plan for me. I'm not going to tell you what to eat. Like, I'm the nutritionist that doesn't talk about nutrition. Right. And so that all really started to change. And that scares people
Does.
because they don't trust themselves. And so that's really what my job as a coach is to help them learn how to do is how to trust themselves and trust their bodies and really look at their internal processes and their blocks and their blind spots.
Got you. So how did you do this with yourself? How do you work with these other people? When you first started losing 30 pounds and this was like a scary process of letting go of food restriction and so forth, can you describe just I guess how you got started, how you started letting go of food rules, and maybe some of the first experiences you had giving yourself permission to eat chocolate or ice cream.
Yeah. So there were times where I felt once I started giving myself permission that I was getting a little out of control still, like I just felt like, oh my God, this feels so scary for me. And I think I did initially put on like 5 pounds, but then it all normalized once I started to integrate these practices. And it wasn't this thing that happened overnight by any means. It happened over definitely over like a year, you know? And but it wasn't me by me weighing myself or me knowing that I was dropping the weight, because I still felt like I was fluctuating. Plus, I was going through some health stuff at the time. So it wasn't always so clear. But then my body just got to a certain point and stayed there. And I was like, no matter what I was eating. And even when I still had a little bit of fear and I was like, oh my God, if I'm eating this, I'd catch myself and I'd be like, it's okay. Just like trust yourself, trust the process, like stay connected to your body. Your body's always going to tell you what it needs, what it doesn't like, all that stuff. And so it wasn't like this awakening of like, oh my God, I lost 30 pounds, blah, blah, blah. Cause then, in the past, if I would lose weight, then I'd be scared about how I was going to keep it off. Right. And so it really was this kind of process of practicing these kind of tools and strategies that my coach gave me with the mindful eating, but I was also doing all the internal work at the same time, like working on shifting my belief system and looking at my value and my worth, right? Because we all know I had a lack of that, right? We talked about that. And so I
Yeah.
had to look at that. And that was part of what started to shift. And there was a part of me that I got to a place where I was like, I respect myself so much that I have no desire to stuff my body full of food and feel like crap anymore. Like I got to a place of such deep self-respect that it wasn't even an option to do that anymore. And that happened through the internal work, not through doing anything with food.
I can feel it. This journey of self-respect, it's so important too, because when someone begins this journey, oftentimes there's some body shame, body dysmorphia you mentioned, and that can get in the way of listening, tuning in, et cetera, et cetera. If someone wanted to get started on increasing their self-esteem by doing some internal work, um, can you describe some of the exercises or journaling prompts or conversations that you had, some new ways of seeing your body and self-worth that enabled you to shift to more self-respect?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very long process and it wasn't any one thing, it was a lot of things that I did consistently. And so for me, the very first step was getting honest with myself. Where was I lying to myself about food, about my body, all that stuff? Like I had to put it all out on the table. I had to share it with someone. I had to like get really honest about what I was doing, right? Because I was hiding and eating and I was, there was so much stuff I had going on food, like being at parties and I'd stand in the corner and like I'd be eating, but no one knew what I was doing, right? And I'd leave there just feeling sick and full and bloated and all this stuff. So I had to get really honest with myself. And I had to also, I went back into my past a little bit and I started to look at the patterns in my life, like in my relationships and in what I do with food and what I do with money. And like it all, the way we do anything is the way we do everything. And so everything kind of lined up in terms of like, oh, I'm doing that the same way. I'm doing that the same way. And so I had to really start to look at those patterns and what belief system was driving those patterns, right? And so by being able to identify those belief systems through journaling and through what I learned, which I can't share what I learned in the master's program, but we did some really in-depth, processes there that just changed my life. And I've altered them a bit and I use them in my coaching now, but I can't give away all the secrets.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
So like just really being able to number one, get honest was a huge part of it. But that's really hard for people because then when they uncover a lot of stuff, they were like, what do I do with all this now? You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
that's why I think having support is so powerful because when we can start to uncover this stuff, we need to have people there to support us through it, to know what to do with it.
And so for your coaching programs and so forth, along with the accountability, like how do you offer support?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mostly work one-to-one with my clients, and I offer them unlimited support in between the sessions. And what that looks like is we text or email anytime. And that to me has been, because my coach offered that, I offer that because that was such a valuable piece to know that I could reach out at any time if I was going through something or I had a question or I needed guidance, that I could reach out anytime. And that's something I do with my clients. So we meet every 10 days. And in between those 10 days, as they're practicing the tools and strategies that are tailored to them that I come up with for our coaching, they're able to lean on me. And then I also have my community on Facebook, my Food Freedom Breakthrough group, which is an amazing community where people are just open and sharing and loving and supportive. And it's really a really great place to start, just to like start to understand what's happening, you know, because I think so many people they're tired of dieting. They're tired of feeling like a failure. They're tired of feeling frustrated, all that stuff. And they need to find, that's why what you're doing, what I'm doing, is so important, because people need to find a place to go, you know?
Yeah, and to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Do you ever get like a text where you're at a wedding or something and then urgent thing comes up? How do you handle that?
So usually I tell my clients when I'm going to be, you know, if I'm traveling or whatever. I do have office hours in terms of contact, and I try not to do any electronics on Sundays. So I have boundaries,
Got you.
you know what I mean? But if I'm at a wedding, I probably wouldn't have my phone on me anyway. So I usually prompt my clients to say, hey, I'm going to be out of whatever, and I'll get if something comes up, I'll get back to you. But also, I want my clients to know that they can lean on themselves and trust themselves. That's part of our work together. And so if they get caught in something, I always encourage them to look for the solution, and I have a process for that. And so I teach that to them, and then I encourage them to lean on that.
Absolutely. Um, so what other projects do you have as we kind of wrap up today? I know you've
Ah,
written books. I know you got a Facebook group. I know, like, if people wanted to know more about you, where would they get started? The website, Karma Chow. Uh,
yeah.
what other stuff do you have going on for people that want to know more about you?
Yeah, so the Food Freedom Breakthrough group on Facebook is incredible. And I do live trainings in there. There's a lot of stuff going on in there. I do one-to-one coaching, but I also have what's called my Empowered Eaters Club, which is basically groups of 4 that I coach privately in a group setting. And then otherwise, this year I'm putting together retreats with equine therapy, because I'm getting trained in equine therapy, and I'm going to start to bring the equine therapy into the coaching with the food and women and all that stuff. Men too. I work with men. But yeah, but my Food Freedom Breakthrough group is the place, because that's a great place to start. You can watch my videos. You can kind of get a feel for me and what I do and all that stuff. And then of course, I always offer a free coaching session to anybody that's new in my world, so that I can really understand where they need help and support. And that's on my website as well. So there's a lot of great stuff out there. I have a YouTube channel. I have a blog. I have all of it.
I love it. Last question. I always finish up with this. Eating enlightenment, a moment where you see food differently, realize that the way your perception was not right. What are your biggest lessons learned, moments of clarity, your biggest eating enlightenment moments on this journey?
Well, I have to be honest. There came a time where I just noticed that I did something different, right? Like, so if I would eat the ice cream, right, I wouldn't go back 2 or 3 or 4 times. I would eat it and then put the bowl in the sink and move on, and I wouldn't have the guilt. So it was like these moments where I was like, whoa, I did that differently. Like, it didn't trigger what it used to trigger, right? So there was a lot of that happening where wasn't so aha or in my face, but it was very a knowing, like, I did that differently. Like, something has shifted in me. I don't feel like, there's still times where I'm blown away, where I'm like home and I'm sitting on the couch and I'm like eating a little bit of popcorn, where in the past I would have eaten this huge vat of popcorn, then I would have gone to the ice cream. I would have gone, and I can eat a bowl of popcorn and be totally satisfied and not be triggered into that place of like trying to fill something that could not be filled with food, right? Because I'm now feeling that in other ways. And so, so yeah, the eating enlightenment, I mean, it just for me, it's just like being able to be in a relationship with food where it's just about nourishment, it's about fuel, it's about enjoyment, and no guilt.
I love
And
it.
no obsession, like no more obsession. So that's to me is kind of how it's played out.
Love it. That's awesome. Thanks
Yeah.
so much for coming on.
Thank you. This was super fun. I'm so excited. Thanks so much.